All right, everybody, welcome back. This is the sixth and final course of the Fusion 360 class here on TMA, and we have a fun project for you tonight. Ben sent me a little rendering of it. It's just really cool. It's a kitchen knife of sorts, and it's going to be a fun project to see done in Fusion. So let's get started with that. As before, if you have any questions, put them in the chat, and when Ben takes a break, I will ask him. If I miss your question, feel free to ask it again, and so I'll get it. Ben, take it away.
All right, everyone. Like as you said, we're in class number 6 of 6 here. We've covered a lot of stuff, from basic modeling techniques to drawings to assembly. And tonight we're going to dive a little bit into some of the more, curved lines and sort of organic shapes, because everything we've done so far has been like straight lines, extruded shapes, pretty, hard line stuff. But if you want to design something that's got a little bit more organic feel to it, we'll touch on something called splines, which is a sketch tool for drawing curved lines that you might be familiar with from other applications. We'll do a little bit with 3D sculpting and show you how that works, or at least sort of make you aware of it, because it's a pretty deep topic to cover. And like as you said, we're going to be working on a kitchen knife. Now, for those of you who may have seen this in the TMA Facebook group this morning, I posted this picture here. So if you folks want to grab it, you can. You don't necessarily need it to follow along. But this is another workflow I want to show you, is how to take a hand-drawn sketch or reference photo and use that to build a model around it. So this picture is at my website, b2builds.com/knife, and from there you can right-click and save that picture, or click on Download Image, and it'll bring it up, and you can still right-click and save that image. You want to save that to your desktop somewhere on your hard drive, because we're going to be bringing it into Fusion to get started. So the other thing, I'll give you folks a minute or two to grab that picture if you want. We're also going to be touching on a bit of 3D rendering. You've noticed that when we start these classes, I usually have a picture up at the beginning, and it's got some materials on it, and it looks somewhat realistic. So we'll get you an introduction to that. Again, that's a pretty deep subject to cover. So what I want to do here tonight is sort of introduce you to some things so that you know that they're there, and then if you want to dive deeper into it, you can do a bit more in-depth research on YouTube and elsewhere to sort of feel it out and try that stuff out. So this knife picture, I've got it up here. I've downloaded it to my computer already. So I'm going to close this window now, or at least minimize it. And we'll close out our class number 6 model here. And again, I'm in my TMA Fusion project that we've done all of our models in thus far. Got a new model up in front of me. I'm going to click Save at the top, and we're going to just call this Knife. Click Save, and then hide our data panel, so that's out of the way. Now to bring that picture in, before we do anything here, I'm going to go up in my toolbar to the Insert drop-down menu here, and the button here is for Attached Canvas, and then it's also in the menu here, Attached Canvas. So if we click on that, now it's asking me, if I stop moving the mouse, it says select a planar face, plane, or sketch plane to place the image. So I'm going to draw this knife sort of from the front view, so I'm going to pick this front plane. And now here, this attached canvas window, it's got that plane selected. And then here where it says select image, I can click on the little image button, and we can pick up that knife image here, b2knife.jpg. Click open. Now it's brought it in here. It's kind of small, so I'll zoom in here. And we get a few controls here. I've got arrows to move it around. I don't really care if I move it around. But there's this little vertical bar here. It's for stretching it horizontally. I'm going to hit undo. Or, oh, sorry, it's the scale factor here. I'm going to change that back to 1. This little corner icon lets you scale it in length and width evenly. So I'll just kind of drag it up just to make it a little bit bigger. Click OK. But at this point I don't really know how big that is. And there's a really nice way to set this up at the right size. So if you look under your knife project here, there's a folder called Canvases. If we expand that out, I've got this B2 knife canvas, got a little icon of a picture here. And if I right-click on this and say Calibrate, when we pick Calibrate, now if I stop moving the mouse, it says pick the first point on the canvas plane. So I'm going to draw a line between 2 points here. I'm going to click on the end of the handle, and a little dot appear there. Now I'm going to pick the second point. I'm going to click on the front edge of the handle here. And now it just drew a little dimension there, and it's only about less than 3/4 of an inch. Let's say I want my knife to be about, or my knife handle to be about 5.5 inches. So long enough that I can fit my hand around it. And if I type in 5.5 there and hit enter, all of a sudden it's blown it way up, so I got to zoom out. But now that I know that it's scaled up this canvas for me, so that handle is about 5.5 inches long. So if you've got a reference photo and you know how big a certain element of that thing has to be, you can calibrate it to the size that you want it to end up. I'm going to save that. All right, before we get into some modeling, anybody have any troubles with the canvas or the picture? Any questions about that step?
Andy Berkey wants to know if it can be done with the photo as well.
Absolutely. Yep. Any photo, digital photo is just a JPEG image. This just happened to be a sketch that I scanned in. So
can you touch? Brad missed how to size. Can you touch on that real quick? I think he was looking for the file so he could follow along.
Sure. Well, I can't show you the tool to size it, like dragging it around, but actually, well, no, if I right-click here, Edit Canvas, so I can size it with the, there's this little corner tool. So it's sort of a little rounded corner. I can click and drag that. And then once it's in, you can right-click on the canvas in your object tree here and choose Calibrate. And then you click one point and another point and tell it how far apart those 2 points should be.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's what we've got. We can move along.
Right on.
Guys, don't
so I got
forget.
my canvas here.
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Don't be bashful about asking questions, guys. That's why we're here. So.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I'm going to start with the knife blade here. So I'm going to zoom up just a little bit. And up in the top level of my assembly here, I'm going to right-click and say New Component. And now our canvas is kind of grayed out because the component is what's active. And we're going to call this blade. It's actually going to be the knife tang as well, but we'll call it blade because that's simple enough. And to start drawing out the blade, we're going to create a sketch like we do with most things in Fusion. Create sketch, and I'm going to click on the front plane here. And it kind of lines it up to my view. And start drawing. The first thing we'll do, the simple thing, we'll do sketch line. So we're going to use the line tool or the L key. And we'll just draw this little vertical line between the handle and the knife. So I'll snap here. That's close enough to my sketch. And right there. And then click the green check mark to finish that line. Now for the curved parts of the line, this is where the spline tool comes in. So it's under our sketch menu, about a third of the way down, spline. And when you click on spline, I'll just draw one up in the middle of space here. Every time I click, it creates another point on a continuous curved line. And then as soon as I hit the green check mark or hit escape, it finishes that line. And if you've done any work with Illustrator or Inkscape or any vector drawing program, you've probably seen something like this before. Each point that we clicked here is a little black dot, and then with each point you get these green handles. So if I click and drag one of these handles, if I change the angle of it, it changes the angle of the line at that spot, and everything else just sort of curves to fit that. Now if I drag that handle out, it makes that part bigger, and if I drag it in closer to the dot, it makes it a sharper corner. So you can really manipulate these curves quite a bit and have a nice smooth line no matter what you do. As a general rule, you try to get by with as few points as possible, because the more points you add, the more jagged it could look. But I'm going to just click this line and hit delete to get rid of it. We'll draw another spline. So I'm going to go under Sketch to the Spline tool, and I'll put my first point. Oh, I got to zoom out here. If stuff falls under your object browser here, you can't. Oh, never mind. Sometimes you get mixed results trying to click on stuff when it's over on the left-hand side. But so I'll zoom out a little bit. All right, Sketch, Spline, and I'll put my first point on the top of the line we just drew. And I'm just going to put my second point way out on the tip of the knife, right about there. Hit the check mark. And I'm still on the Spline tool, so I'm going to hit Escape. Now I'm back to just the arrow selection tool. I'll click this straight line that we just made, but I've got those green handles again. So if I click the green handle up here at the top, I want the top of the knife to sort of start out flat. So I'll make my handles horizontal here. I can kind of drag it out right about there. And I click on the line again, and I get my handles on the other end. And I can sort of play around with this shape on this end and how I want that to look. And you kind of get a feel for this after you play with it for a while, but move those handles around until you get a curve that feels like it looks good to you. Right. And now let's draw another spline. So go under Sketch, Spline tool. And this will be another simple one. I'll go from the tip of the knife, and I'll put one right on the bottom edge here. And we'll just leave it at that. Same kind of deal. I'm going to hit Escape, so I'm not drawing any more splines. Pick the one we just drew, and I can drag those handles around again. I'll make this bottom one kind of flat. Click the line again, and move the handles around on the front end. And it feels like a pretty good curve. And I've got that sketch in the background to sort of, the canvas to sort of follow as we go. And we'll do one more spline, Sketch, Spline. Now I could have, if I wanted these to curve around, I could have just done one spline all the way around, but I want a sharp point here and I want a sharp point down here. So I'm going to zoom up, and we'll try just 2 points for this one as well. So we'll go spline from there down to the bottom of the knife, click the check mark, hit Escape, and now we'll pick that line, and I want this to sort of come out horizontally, and then at the top I want this one to be horizontal as well, roughly. That looks pretty good. So now the handles are real short there because it's kind of a sharp curve at each end. So I move those handles in. But now we've got a nice curve that sort of starts out here, slopes down, and smoothly curves down into the bottom. So all we had to do was place some endpoints and sort of tweak the curve of that line, and all this comes out really nice and smooth. And because I've closed the path in, you can see the inside of this is kind of a beige color. That shows us it's a closed path. We can extrude it now. So I'm going to stop this sketch and click Create, Extrude, or the E key. Click our knife shape, our blade shape. And I'm not just going to extrude out in one direction. It's going to be useful to us to have this blade centered on the plane. So in the extrude window, we're going to change our direction to symmetric so that our blade is centered on that center plane. And then I like to change the measurement option here in the extrude to whole length. It's this button on the right that says whole length. Click on that. And then the number I enter in here is going to be that overall thickness. So I'm going to make that 0.1 inches, so a little less than an eighth, 100 thousandths there. So now I've extruded it out in two directions. So the whole length or the whole width of the blade is 0.1 inches. Click OK. And we've got a knife blade. Now if I go back up in my hierarchy here to the canvases, I'm going to change one thing about our canvas that I forgot to do earlier. If you look here, the blade is sort of covering up the drawing. And sometimes you want to be able to see the whole drawing all the time, even if there's objects in front of it. So if I right-click on this B2 knife canvas and say Edit Canvas, there's a checkbox here that says Display Through. That means it'll show through everything no matter what. So if I turn that on, click OK, now I can still see that picture showing through our blade, even though that blade is a solid object. So that can be handy. That'll be useful to us when we want to throw our rivets in here on the handle. I'm going to save that. Any questions at this point? Maybe not. Everyone's paying very good attention. Either that or you're all getting good enough that you can follow along with me at this clip. Oh, Izzy, if you're talking, I can't hear you.
I said we haven't got anything, and I said if anybody has any questions, throw them up real quick, and then I commented, comment, yes, that's what it is. Everybody's paying really good attention tonight.
Right on. Okay. So you sort of get the basic concept of splines. You set points along the line, and the curvature of the line kind of follows through those points. So for the handle, I could try and make splines or all this around all of it and then extrude it out, but we're still going to get sort of a flat-looking handle. And that's where the Fusion sketch environment comes in. Excuse me, the Fusion sculpting environment. But first thing first, I'm going to go up to my knife project, right-click, and make a new component. I'm going to give it a name, and this is going to be our handle. Actually, that's not, well, this will be the scales eventually. So the knife scales on the handle. So now if I'm in the scales component, it's activated. And up in the Create menu, the first thing here, the very top left here, it says Model. You pull this down, you get different workspaces. We spend most of our time in the modeling workspace or drawing workspace like we did last week. We're going to end up in sculpting. It's not displayed here exactly, but it will be. So our scales component is activated. If we go up to the Create section of the toolbar, pull down the menu, or just click this purple button here that says Create Form. So I'll go all the way to the bottom here to Create Form. And now, in the top left corner, it now says Sculpt. And we've got a whole new set of buttons across our toolbar. Now, like I said before, this sculpting environment gets pretty deep. There's a lot of interesting stuff you can do in here. We're just going to scratch the surface here tonight just so you can get an idea of what's here and what's possible. But there's some good long tutorials online on YouTube that can show you some more cool stuff here. But to make our knife handle, I'm going to go to this first section here. It says Create, and we're just going to create a box. So we'll click on Box. And you see here it's kind of a rounded corner box. I'll click that tool, and it says Select a plane or planar face. I'm going to pick the that front plane because I want this to be centered on that plane just like our knife blade was. And if we're zoomed up and that knife blade is really big, it's going to think you're clicking the side of the knife blade. So again, this is something I've mentioned before. Technically the knife blade is in front here. So if I click and hold, I get this little menu of everything that was under my mouse cursor. So if I pick XY, that's the XY plane. That's where I want my box to be centered on. So I'll click that. All right, now nothing's happened yet, but if I stop moving my mouse, now it says specify the center point. So I'm going to say it's probably roughly around the center rivet on the handle. Click that. Now it says specify the size of the rectangle. All right. So I'm just dragging it out like I do any rectangular sketch. It doesn't have to be exact. Let's say right about there. Now we've got something we can start working with. All right, our first problem is that it's just extruding out this direction and our knife blade is sitting over here. I want that to be centered. So in our box window, under direction, we're going to say symmetric, just like when we extruded the knife blade. So that's better. It's a little thick. I can take the arrow and drag it in, make this a little thinner. And this is just to get us started. And then you can see the faces are all kind of divided up by these lines. Some of them are curved lines. This will become a bit more clear once we start working with it, but I think it's the length faces we want to change. So in the box window here, I'm going to change length faces to, I don't know, 4. Now let's make that 6. Now you can see we've got kind of a grid here that goes 6 across. Those extra lines will give us more points to sort of move around. So imagine that it's like a spline and I've just got 6 points across it that I can tweak. And you can edit and add to these as you go, but this will be enough for us to work with. And I think the rest of it will keep as defaults. And click OK. Now here's where it gets interesting. So I've got this rounded box, but obviously it doesn't match the shape of our handle. So I'll go to the front view. And one thing we want to make sure of is that this side of the handle matches the other side of the handle. So the first thing I'll do is under the symmetry section here, I'll pull down the menu and say mirror internal. That's also the default buttons that's at the top. Is I want this handle to mirror itself from one side to the other. So I'll click mirror. And the way you tell it what to mirror is you pick 2 different faces or 2 different sections of this grid on either side of the line that you want to mirror. Again, so just watch, this will make a bit more sense. So I want it to mirror across the center here, so I'll pick, let's say, this face, it's shown in blue, and then I'll pick the one opposite. And now this green line just showed up. That tells you whatever we do to this shape to sculpt it, it's going to mirror it on the back side. Click OK.
Ben, Jim's asking if the first menu selection in the pull-down box always the default.
Not necessarily. and you can, like I think I've shown before, you can change what's up in your toolbar. You can pick any menu item and add it to your toolbar or remove it. Yeah, usually the first thing is a default, but I can't say that for sure. Good question, though. All right, so most of the magic in sculpting happens with this modify menu here, the edit form, which happens to be the top one in the menu. If I click edit form, oh, there we go. If I click on a face or just an edge or a point, I get this move tool that you probably remember from when we were moving stuff around in our assemblies, and we also get the little scaling tools that you might remember from when we brought the canvas in. So let's take this line, and if I hold down the control key, I can select more than one thing. So I'm going to pick, actually, sorry, to jump around here. If I double click a line, it automatically selects that line all the way around as far as it can go. So I've just selected this little band around our box. And if I grab the arrow here and drag it down, it's now deforming to match that. So now I've matched that bit of the handle of my sketch here. And I'm still in the edit form tool, so now I can click on something else. Let's click on this line, and I'll hold down control and click this line. And if you look closely, the ones on the back side are shown in yellow because they're mirroring what I'm doing on the front side. So I can grab the arrow here and drag those up to match the bottom of the handle there. But now the front doesn't look quite right because the front is still tall. I can grab this sort of top corner edge, grab the arrow and pull it down. But now this one's not quite right. I can grab the top edge here and sort of stretch it up. Now it's looking like it's starting to match my handle shape. That's where having this sort of hand-drawn sketch is really handy, because you might tweak one point or one edge and other stuff might move around the way you didn't expect it to. So I'm going to jump to the middle of the handle here. It's got the sort of downward curve. I can click on this edge and control click on this bottom edge. I'll drag that up. That's getting closer. So there's a lot of tweaking to be done here. I can click here, control click here, drag this up a bit. Here and here, drag that up. But now this is too high. Like I said, there's some tweaking to be done. Pick those two edges and pull them back down. That's looking better. Now if we go back to the back of our knife here, I'm going to pick this whole face and this whole face. I get the same tools. I'll go back to a front view. And instead of just dragging them around, well, I'll do that first. I'm going to take the, I could use the arrows, or I can use this square to move it around in that plane. I'll kind of put it down here, but now I can rotate it. Because I've also got this rotate handle, this little circle at the top. I can click and drag that.
What?
And I can make that sort of fit the angle of the back of the knife. So drag it up. So we're almost there. I'll pick this edge. Oops, I grabbed the scale tool. Undo that. Grab the square here and pull that that corner up. You can do the same thing down here. Got this little corner edge. Drag it down. And maybe I'll double click this line here and probably rotate that a bit because that just looks a little more natural because the handle kind of curves that way. And maybe we'll click this face, this whole face on the top, just pull it up a little bit, give the whole thing a little bit more curve to it. So any face, any edge, you can double click an edge to select the whole thing. You can click and control click to select multiple things. And just for good measure here, let's see. Look at it kind of from the top here. I'll grab this edge and this edge with the control key. Oops. And I'll grab this arrow here and I'll drag those inward, kind of give it like a little place to put your thumb, maybe. So now we've got, you know, these nice sweeping curves across the top and around the bottom. I've indented it from the side as well. You can do some pretty slick looking stuff with these sculpting tools, and that was just starting with a box. I'm going to click OK on the Edit Form window. And you can do a lot more here. You can start with a cylinder shape, a sphere, a torus. This quad ball is another interesting shape. It's a sphere, but you can manipulate it a little bit differently. Pipe, you can do a standard extrude, but then you can sculpt it. Same with revolve and sweep, loft. So a lot of these are tools that you've probably already used in the modeling space, but if you do it here in the sculpting space, you can kind of create that basic shape and then play with it like we did with the handle. But once you're done doing all that sculpting work, you have to click up in the top right of our toolbar where it says Finish Form. And now it's still the same shape, but all of those little grid lines have sort of gone away because you're not editing it right now. You can go back and change it if you need to, but that's just how it's gonna appear. So now I'll go up and activate the whole assembly here. You can see our handle and our knife blade are looking pretty good. Save this. Any questions?
So far, just a whole lot of jaw dropping and whoaing and wooing and eyeing. Me included. This is pretty wild.
All right. I'm going to move probably a little bit faster through some of this so we can get time for some rendering stuff at the end. I don't need the canvas right now, so I'm going to click the light bulb on canvases to get rid of it. And just to keep it out of the way, well, no, leave the blade visible. So I'm going to take this knife handle and chop it in half so I can run the knife blade body all the way through it. So I'm going to jump back into my blade component and activate it. So I'm working in the blade here. We're going to make a new sketch on that XY plane, the front plane. And I'm just going to draw a big rectangle around the whole knife handle. I don't really care about dimensions. Not everything has to have a dimension or a constraint. Stop the sketch. And that rectangle is now sitting on that very center plane with everything else that we've drawn. We'll click extrude that rectangle. And just like our knife blade, I'm going to make our direction symmetric, with the whole length being 0.1 inches, same as our blade. So that's what I want to cut away. And now, because the knife blade is visible, it thinks I want to cut away from the handles and the blade. Oh, you know what? I'm going to cancel this. I want this, I'm trying to cut apart the handle, so I shouldn't be in the blade component. I'm going to go over to the scales component, expand out the blade, because that's where that sketch was done. See, here's my rectangle sketch. It's underneath the blade. I should be able to, because I haven't done anything with it yet, I can drag it into the scales component, and now that sketch is underneath the knife scales like it should be. Alright, so we'll extrude this rectangle in symmetric, whole length of 0.1. Alright, so now it's saying cut away this rectangle, but it's also cutting away some of our blade here. I could hide the knife blade if I didn't want it to cut it, or in the extrude window it says objects to cut, and there's a little arrow next to it. If we click that arrow to expand that out, it's showing me everything that it's cutting away from, both the blade and the knife scales. If I uncheck the blade, here, body 1 of blade, now it's not going to touch my blade. It's only going to cut away from the knife scales. Click OK there. Now, our fancy sculpted body, we can do, you know, standard cuts from it like we do with other shapes. We got this nice gap down the middle.
Ben, Brad asked, how do you add more faces?
Let me roll back in my timeline just a bit. Double click on that form. If you've already created a 3D form or a sculpted form, you can go to Modify and Insert Edge. That's the most common way I've done it anyway. Insert Edge, and then I have to pick an edge to start from. So I just pick that singular edge, or I can double click it. Oh yeah, here we go. And then it's asking for you, there's a little slider here or a number, so it's at 0.5, so that's 50% of the way between this edge and the one next to it. So I can drag that around, place it where I want it. So if I need more detail in one area, I can, you know, add edges. And then I have more points that I can manipulate.
All right, very cool. Jim Bashir's asked, how does, well, let me get back here. How does it keep both sides the same depth? Did it offset both sides?
Jim, you're probably asking about the cutaway we did of the knife scales. Let me jump back forward. Oh, finish form. Jump forward. There we go. Yeah, when we did this cut, this extruded cut, under direction I chose symmetric, so that it's that sketch is expanding out in both directions from the center of where I put it. And then I set the whole length to be 0.1 inches, so it's the same as our blade.
Cool.
All right.
That's it.
All right. So I've got this gap between our knife scales, but it's this crazy sort of organic shape that would be hard to sketch to make the knife blade fit it. So what we can do, now I'm going to go to my blade component and activate that. But in the knife scales, I've got the scales expanded out. I'm going to expand out the bodies. Since we cut it in half, I've got two bodies here. I've got one side of the handle and the other side of the handle. So just to get it out of our way and make this easier, I'm going to click the light bulb and hide half of the handle. And now I've only got the one half showing. And mind you, I'm still in the knife blade component. That's what's activated. I don't even need to create a sketch right now, although no, this doesn't perfectly match up with the handle. I'm not going to worry about that now. I'm just going to do an extrusion. So I'll create, extrude, and I'm just going to click on the flat face right here, and it knows this contour, and I'm just going to extrude it out 0.1 inches. And because it's intersecting the blade, it thinks that's a cut, and you can see it showing it in red because it's a cut. We'll change that operation to join and click OK. And now the body of our knife blade and the tang here are all one piece, but we've got our knife blade that we sketched out, and we've got a tang here that matches perfectly the contour of that crazy handle shape that we made. I can turn the that other knife scale back on, that other body. Activate everything. Now this is a little bit funny. Just to show that you can go back and change the stuff, I'm going to roll my timeline back to where I did the form here. Double click it.
Ben, while we're here, Gordon asked, when I move the sketch of the box from the blade to the scales, it only detects the blade from the object to cut. Is there a reason for that? It seems, and then he goes on and says, it seems to do it when I select the whole length for the measurement type.
I'm reading this in the chat and I'm having a tough time following you, Gordon. Move the sketch of the box from the blade to the scales. It only detects the blade from the objects to cut. Right, you're trying to extrude that thing to cut the handle in half. I mean, as long as the handle is visible and your sketch is in the same space as the handle, it should want to cut that away. I guess I couldn't tell you for sure why it's not seeing that. All right, yeah, sorry, Gordon. I wish I had a better advice for you. Maybe it'll come to me in the middle of the night tonight, but you probably don't want me to call you then. All right. Sorry, man. We'll keep moving here, but like we've said before, you might have to go back and watch some of this if you want to catch up again. But so I just went back to my form here and stretched out this corner to fit. I'll finish the form, and then I'll step back to the end of my timeline. And there, now my knife blade matches up a little bit better here. All right, in the interest of time, I think we'll skip the rivets, but we'll put an edge on the knife here. Let's see. So if we go to the modify chamfer, we'll just put a chamfer on the two edges of the knife. This one, and this one. Set it to 0.050, so half of the knife blade. Oh, you know what? When I modeled this before, it worked fine, but it's trying to follow the chamfer around this edge because it ended up being a smooth edge here. And cancel that. So you don't have to do this if you don't want, but I'm going to roll back to the knife blade sketch. If I double click it here, let's see. There we go. I'll click that corner, and I'll change the spline here so it's a sharp corner. Stop that sketch. If I try my chamfer again, modify, chamfer, pick this edge. Now that chamfer edge doesn't continue around here because it's not a smooth curve. Make that 50 thou. But that's a pretty poor cutting edge. So we'll do a chamfer type of 2 distances. Now they're both at 50 thousandths, but I can drag this arrow. Oop, not that one. Alright, we'll just type it in up here. 1/2 inch. I'll make that 0.75 inches.
Now you're talking.
Yep, that looks better. That's the edge we're looking for. Okay, I'm going to save this. Now, for rendering, some of the photorealistic rendering tools in here, you may remember from one of our previous classes we set some materials. So we wanted a maple material to show up in the bill of materials that we made on a box last week. The physical materials are there more for like mass and density sort of properties if you're doing anything that needs that information. But if you're just rendering, what you want are appearances. I can hit the A key, or I can go under the Modify menu. Toward the bottom here is Appearance. And this Appearance window pops up. And right now, everything in our design has this gray color, and that's a steel satin appearance. That's sort of the default for everything. But down in the bottom section of this window is the Appearance library, and you've got a variety of categories here: glass, leather, metal, other, paint. You can scroll down and get some more here as well. Or you can search for different materials or colors. I can say red, and as long as there we go, it'll show you all the red materials that you have to pick from. You want to have this box checked here. It says Show Downloadable Materials. Some of the materials are already on your hard drive with the Fusion install, but some of them are up in the Fusion Cloud, so if they make some new appearance, you can download it and use it. So I'm going to clear that search box, and I'll click into wood. Let's see, finished woods. Here, mahogany semi-gloss. And I can just take that mahogany semi-gloss and drag it onto one of the knife scales, that body. I'll change my view. And now it shows up in this top box here. It says, in this design are steel, satin, and mahogany semi-gloss. Those are the 2 materials that we have in our model now. So I'll drag that mahogany onto the other knife scale. And I want our knife blade to shine a little bit, so I'm going to search for polished, because we've got a variety of polished metals in here. I don't think they make knives out of stainless steel. Maybe they do. I've never made a knife myself, but let's go stainless steel polished. Drag that onto the blade, and you can see it's got a little bit of a shine to it. That'll become more apparent when we do a render. And I'll clear that search box. And if there's some other material that you want to use that's not on your computer, it has this little download arrow next to it. So like I could pick glossy cherry. Well, I don't have it on my computer. If I click the download arrow, you can see this little blue triangle shows up as it's downloading. And after usually a pretty short wait, that'll be down on your PC. So there, it's done. That blue triangle went away. I can change my scales to cherry. Drag that onto the two knife scales. Right now we're still in the model workspace, so everything's still kind of flat. But if we go into the top left corner here under model, I can pick render. And now we're in the rendering space, and stuff is starting to look a little bit more realistic. And now I've got some different tools across the top here, but this first one here is appearance. And it's the same appearance window we just had up a moment ago. And this glossy cherry, any material that you have up here, once it's in your model, you can tweak it. So if I double click on this cherry, I can change things like the scaling of it to make those grain lines bigger or smaller to what might look more appropriate. I can change the rotation, so if I want the grain direction to go one way or another way. And I've got some other parameters here, roughness, reflectance, how shiny it is. Click done on that. And you can do some interesting stuff with textured surfaces as well. So I'll go into the search box in the appearances here and type in textured. So we've got a, let's see, I'll scroll back up. There we go. Plastic textured polka. It's kind of an interesting one. I'll turn one of our knife scales plastic for a moment. And you can see it's got these little polka dot texture to it. Each one sort of catches the light. So it is showing up as an actual rough texture on there. But again, once it's in your model, up here in this design, you can double click that and change its color. So we could go for an Izzy green. Yes. Change the scale, make those bigger. And you can play around with all these settings and get some interesting stuff to happen. It's got a little cherry, a little green, just for fun. I'll close that appearance window. So going across the toolbar at the top, we've got a scene settings button. Click on that. Give you a quick overview of what's in here. You've got some basic settings here, whether you want the ground plane to show up. You can see this knife is casting a shadow. If I turn off the ground plane, that goes away, or turn it back on. You can have reflections. You can set how much of it you want to reflect in the ground plane. We're going to turn that off. There's lots of camera settings. You can sort of mimic different lenses and cameras. And then this environment library and this other tab here in the scene settings window, you can load up different environments for different kinds of lighting. So I could go pick a environment here and either double click it or just drag it into the space. Now it says warm light, and now the light has a bit more of a yellow-orange hue to it. Or you can download some more interesting ones here. So here, dry lake bed. Click the download button. Fusion has a few of these sort of realistic environments loaded, but it is sort of a standard HDR environment format that you can find in 3D modeling circles. You can buy or get these other environments to load up. But so I've downloaded dry lake bed. I'll drag that in here. Oh, is it thinking about it? There we go. Give it a moment. Now it doesn't look like much has happened because we haven't told it exactly what to do. You can see the blue sky reflecting in the top of the knife here. If I go back to the settings tab, it's still defaulting to a solid color background. So where it says background solid color, we can change that to environment. And now we've got the dry lake bed, but that knife is still kind of floating off in space. So it doesn't feel right. if I check the box that says flatten ground, now it's put the bottom of this lake bed as the bottom of our model. So now everything kind of moves around like you would expect. So we've got a knife out in the middle of nowhere, just because. I can zoom up on it, find an angle that feels good. Or if I want the light, like here's the sun. It's pretty high, direct above us, but if I want to change where that light's coming from, or change the way the environment is with relation to my knife, we can, let's see, where did it go? Here, so under settings and position, click that, and now I've got these couple of sliders here for the rotation. So what I'm actually doing is rotating the whole environment around my knife. I'm not moving the knife, I'm just changing where the environment falls. Just to demonstrate that a bit better, I'll switch back to warm light. I'll double click on it. This is what the warm light environment looks like if you want to see the background. There's like some grid lights back here and this warm orange light here. When you change the rotation of it, you're changing where the lights are coming from. So if there's a certain angle that you like better, if I don't want the shadows over here, I can rotate. Now the shadows are being cast in different directions.
Very cool. Jim asked, does the environment rotation include the sun position?
Yes. This dry lake bed is kind of a bad example because the sun is pretty much directly overhead. But yeah, if the sun is sort of at any particular side, you can really tell. But even you can see the shadows on the knife here. They do move around, so the light source is changing.
All right.
But then the final piece of this is once you've dialed in your settings the way you want them, you can either do an in-canvas render, which means it's going to render on your machine. You can, so that's the little green play button here, or you can click the render button. And this, if say you've got a really complex model, it takes a long time to render, you can have Fusion's cloud servers there. Their servers do the rendering and just get the picture back to you when it's done. There are these cloud credits, which I'm still not totally clear on. You can still use, if you're a paying user, you pay for a certain number of cloud credits. If you're an enthusiast like most of us here and you've got the free plan, you get a certain amount of cloud credits, but if you put a rendering job up on their servers, it's probably going to get lower priority compared to somebody who's paying for it. But you can set the dimensions of the picture you want, the quality level of standard or final, and depending on how much work it'll take, it'll tell you how many credits it'll take and how much time it'll take. For most of the stuff I don't bother with that. I'll just click the in-canvas render button, and then your computer will start rendering it, and then it does multiple passes, and each time it gets a little bit sharper, a little bit clearer. And then once it gets to a point that you like it, I usually click the capture image button up in the toolbar, and it just saves whatever's in front of me here. I can click OK, give it a name, normally I'd let this run longer because it's still kind of a grainy image, but I'll click the stop button here. And if I open up my project again, it says data in this folder has been updated. Click refresh. So now in my TMA Fusion project folder, I've got this knife version 5.png. If I double click it, it'll actually open up in my web browser. So like the knife render that got posted on social media today, this is how I made it. I rendered it saved it out to my project, and then it opens up in the browser, and I can, you know, save this and do what I want with it. But there's our knife. You can see the ground is reflected in the polished steel handle. We've got the nice, or excuse me, the polished steel blade. We've got our handle. It's got a little bit of shine to it. So I know I kind of breezed through this pretty quickly, but one thing I want to emphasize about everything that we've done here is, especially, you know, splines or sculpted bodies or this rendering stuff. Get in there and just play with it. You know, see what happens. If you screw something up, you can undo or just do another model. The more you just sort of fiddle around with it, the better idea you'll get of what you can do, and have some fun with it. So I think we're coming up on about an hour here, and we'll open up the floor for a few more questions, and then we'll call it a night.
All right, before we open up the floor for questions, I just want to thank everybody for coming. We did the last course of the last of the 6-week course, and remind everybody that in a few weeks we'll have a more advanced class for 3D Fusion, so you guys are welcome for that. And of course there'll be announcements for that out on the TMA page, the Facebook page, and I'll try to get a email out as well. And then remind everybody, next week we're going to start our turning classes. I don't have a date dialed in for that yet, but I will have a date dialed in and let everybody know over on Facebook within the next day or two. So, and